think this is 11 o'clock. Well, 11, 5 past 11, this is time to start. You are at the high-level panel on global water governance. This session is proposed and is convened by the National Water Agency of Brazil and the World Water Council. We have a very distinguished panel here. I would like to introduce even the member who is not yet here, but he will be coming in and out, and that's the chair, but hopefully he will occupy rather soon. That's the chair of Dr. Michel Jarraud, who is the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, and at the same time, he is the current chair of the United Nations Water, as it is called, UN Water, which is a coordinating committee that coordinates all the work of the United Nations system, some 29 agencies in water. He's a meteorologist by training, and he's the one who will represent the United Nations voice. Then next to the empty chair of Michel, we have Professor Francisco Nunes Correia, who is the president of the Portuguese Water Partnership, a former Minister of Environment and a professor of civil and environmental engineering. Thank you so much, Francisco, for joining the panel. Next to him, we have Dr. Wim Kuijken of the Netherlands, who is the Delta Commissioner. Now, what Delta Commissioner is in itself a very important part of how water is being governed in a country which is always subject to the vagaries of water. And thank you so much, Wim, for coming here. He's an economist by training and had a distinguished career in public administration. He served in the Prime Minister's office. He was managing the city of Hague. And currently now he is coordinating across the Netherlands a major project dealing with the protection of the delta areas against the potential dangers what climate variability may pose to that country. And then he will address the issues from that point of view. Next to him, we have Alistair Rieu-Clark. Alistair is a senior lecturer. He is replacing Professor Patricia Wouters, who couldn't be with us this morning. And Alistair is from the University of Dundee IHP HELP Center for Water Law, Policy and Science. IHP stands for International Hydrological Program of UNESCO, and HELP is also a program of UNESCO IHP that stands for Hydrology for Environment, Life and Policy. Alistair will be bringing in the legal issues and policy issues and the linkage between water science and policy. Last but not least, we are honored by having the president of the Brazil Water Agency, ANA as it is called, Mr. Vicente Andreu, who is a statistician by training, but he had a very distinguished career by chairing hydroelectric plants. He was a secretary of a planning office of the city of Campinas and other activities. Last, let me introduce myself. My name is András Szöllősi Nagy. I'm a UNESCO officer. Currently, I'm serving as the rector of the UNESCO IHE Institute for Water Education in the Netherlands. In my free time, I'm a professor of stochastic hydrology. Some of my students call this occupation as a professor of sarcastic hydrology. What I will try to do in the coming 2 hours, with your help and with the help of our distinguished panel, is to go through an extremely important debate, namely water governance. we will spend at the beginning of the debate to walk around this concept. What does governance mean at various levels? And I would like to invite members of the panel to share with us their views. Then we will go over to some of the global issues. Perhaps you may wish to recall the basic message of the third World Water Development Report that has been released 3 years ago at the last World Water Forum in Istanbul, with one single principal message and several other messages. This message was as follows: the world is moving towards a water crisis. The crisis, however, is not the crisis of the resource, that we are running out of the resource, but rather is a crisis of how that resource is being governed, how that resource is being governed by institutions, by law, by cooperation, by ethical issues, by research, by education, and transboundary issues, international issues. So the definition, which I'm going to quote now, copyright UNDP and the Global Water Partnership, reads as follows: water governance can be defined as the range of political, social, economic, and administrative systems that are in place to regulate the development and management of water resources and provision of water services at different levels of society. Now, this definition is so general that it would be almost impossible to operationalize it. What does it really mean in practice? So let us have a quick view around how members of the panel believe it. The modus operandi we are going to have is that I will provoke the members of the panel with all sorts of questions. And then I would also like to have your views, to have an interactive session. Any comment you may wish to have, we have mics around here that you can use. Actually, we are using 3 languages this morning. On this little apparatus, what you have, channel 1 is for French, channel 2 is for English, and channel 5 is for Portuguese. So that's the mechanism of what we are going to use. Now let me now turn to the members of the panel. Perhaps I would like to ask first Francisco, what do you think about this governance, the water governance? What would be your definition of water governance, both as a minister who has been involved in governance issues and now leading an NGO, but at the same time being a university professor? What is in your definition governance?
Well, that goes very much to the point. Government and NGO, government and civil society. I go along very well with that definition that you just read from, I think, UNDP. I think that governance is it's the complex reality that governs, and governs in a very broad sense, not in a majestic sense of a government saying that this and that should be done, but everything that has an impact on the policy that is really implemented. And those mechanisms, those interactions between governmental agencies, non-governmental initiatives, stakeholders as key actors of the process, all those interactions have an impact on the policies that are really put in place. And those policies may be very explicit, rational, quite well discussed, deeply discussed policies, or maybe quite empirical policies. But what governs the water management, the water use, how disputes are solved, all that is governance. Now, so governance in some sense is a description of all the mechanisms, formal and informal, that contribute to the way water is used and managed and disputes resolved. Now, having said that, we can improve governance, and improve governance is mainly improve legitimacy, participation, citizenship. Everyone has a say. Governmental agencies have a role, but non-governmental agencies have a role. And it is the interaction of both that should become into the field as the policy to be implemented. All this process is governance. So I see governance as a quite, let's say, open-end list of mechanisms, institutions, initiatives that contribute to reality. That's how I see it.
Thank you. Perhaps not everybody knows in this audience that one of the oldest water governance institution is in the Netherlands, the system of the water boards, which goes back to, if I'm not mistaken, 600 or 700 years, and it still functions today, because for the Dutch, rational water management is a very important issue. How do you see that matter of governance, Wim, from your point of view as a government commissioner?
Well, Andras, you're right. In the Netherlands, for more than 800 years, we have this water board, our most important governmental layer to keep our feet dry and to clean our water. And indeed, it started simple, and I think we have to try to keep the discussion simple too, also on the global level. It started simple. We won our land out of water. So we started decades ago, ages ago, more than 800 years ago, by making a dike, bringing out the water, polder the land, making land, and then you have interests within the dike from people working there, farmers, for instance. It started even with monks. And they had to arrange something to be productive, to start their economy, to defend themselves, to bring in the water, to make agriculture possible. And that is the way it started in the Netherlands, with governance of your polder. So I think even today, on the global level, it is the way you organize yourself to solve a problem or to reach a goal. And that includes many aspects. But you need a goal or a problem to solve, and you need leadership. Thank you very much.
But you're not off the hook yet, because there's one item which is extremely interesting in the Netherlands, and I'm living there now for a couple of years. It's an amazing place. How the Dutch are building consensus around water. They have the polder model. I know that politicians don't build consensus, but that's what they should do. But what is this polder model? Can you say a few words about how do they come to the consensus amongst the various stakeholders?
Well, this polder model is actually nowadays connected to our socio-economic way of negotiating with labor unions and employer unions, etc. But it's coming from this old way of making land. So you have to talk together to set a goal. And that takes some time sometimes. But the decision you take then is probably a decision with high quality.
Oh, yes.
So that is the way we are organized. And even today, our political system is a system of consensus with a pluriform network and arena of political parties who have to work together to form a government. And that takes sometimes a little longer, but at the end, I think the quality of the decision-making is better. But that is the Netherlands.
Well, the polder model is this, and this is a consensus building mechanism or using water as a peace builder. And those farmers who were working together on making the polder, if one had a wet feet, that is to say, he disagreed with the others, then everybody had a wet feet. But nobody wanted to have the wet feet, so they had to go back and agree. And that is a mechanism that is deeply rooted in the decision-making mechanism, not only in water, but in the whole governance system. Alistair, you are at a Waterloo Science and Policy Center. How, as a scientist, you would define water governance, and where you see the critical issues.
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a scientist. Probably a
Not
a
everybody
lawyer
is perfect. That's
closer,
okay.
just to keep me out of trouble. You know what? I mean, I would agree with a lot of what has already been said in terms of. I mean, essentially, governance is around how we organize ourselves. You know, and how we organize ourselves around water, and I think that leads to you know, two aspects that are fundamental. Laws and policies, and then the institutions and actors. And I think that's where governance takes us a bit further than, you know, just looking at, we can't just look at the law, we can't just look at the policy. We actually have some good, you know, good model laws, whether they're transboundary treaties or national legislation or regional instruments. So we have that, and we have the policies to support that and support the implementation. But that's simply not enough. What we need is something else, and that's around the institutions and actors, I think. And really, where I think the focus on governance is, and where the emphasis is, and where it should develop, is around the interaction. On the one hand, we have the laws and policies on paper, great, easy to write those. How do we get them into practice? The institutions and actors. How do we understand the interface between those two? Because simply writing a law isn't good enough. You need to ensure that there's strong dialogue, stakeholder engagement to implement that law, and to ensure that it's constantly re-evaluated. So I think, for me, simply it's around how we organize ourselves, and crucial to that is that interaction. One hand, laws and policies, and then the institutions and actors.
All right. Can I turn to Vincent Andreu? Vincent, you're responsible for a huge organization in Brazil, which is a federal setup. The states have a great deal of rights in dealing with their water issues. How do you manage, how do you govern a system you know, it contains the Amazon, and the huge thing with all the tremendous economic development that is taking place in Brazil, where water clearly is becoming a key issue. What is your way of approaching governance at a federal level, as a federal regulatory agency head?
Bem, bom dia às senhoras e senhores, bom dia meus colegas aqui de mesa, um cumprimento ao professor Andras. No caso brasileiro, o Sistema Nacional de Recursos Hídricos foi definido na Constituição de 1988. Portanto, o termo governança não é um termo corrente nas discussões, e esse conceito mais geral de governança que foi aqui apresentado, com o qual concordo, fazer alguma colocação afinal, ele está representado dentro do Sistema Nacional, e a Constituição definiu que o nosso país, como vocês sabem, o Brasil tem 8.500.000 quilômetros quadrados, um país de grande complexidade, diversidade ambiental e hídrica também. A Constituição definiu que há um duplo domínio da União e dos Estados. E a Constituição também definiu de que você tem uma gestão descentralizada e participativa, e dá à organização social, chamada Comitês de Bacia Hidrográfica, uma grande responsabilidade. Então, de uma maneira geral, é assim que nós nos organizamos, é assim que nós temos a nossa governança, a partir de órgãos gestores nos estados. Esses órgãos gestores são representados também em nível nacional, no caso a Agência Nacional de Águas, os comitês de bacia hidrográfica que existem, além de todas as leis, basicamente a Lei 9433, uma lei nacional de 1997, é que dá esse contexto, essa estrutura geral, que eu chamaria aqui da nossa governança, representada pelo nosso sistema. Eu gostaria de Andras, se você me permite, dizer que, num sentido geral, a governança, eu gostaria de fazer uma pequena distinção entre as questões que que se referem ao aspecto nacional e a governança tomada em nível internacional. Eu queria fazer essa distinção logo de início, porque eu penso que esse conceito geral de procedimentos e instituições articuladas no sentido de atingir um determinado objetivo, a regulação mais eficiente da água é correta, porém, quando nós pensamos na governança internacional ou na governança global, isso traz à luz também questões relativas à soberania e dominalidade em relação ao recurso natural. Então, eu queria aqui colocar à mesa essa preocupação de que talvez o termo governança global faça com que haja um tempo precioso na discussão do conceito, e eu acredito que nós não temos esse tempo a perder. Então, nós temos adotado, no caso brasileiro, a governança como uma questão nacional, e estamos procurando uma definição mais apropriada para aquilo que poderia representar mais adequadamente a governança global da água.